everybody. Welcome to Barely Filtered. This is my first time back in 2 weeks. We took a little break for the horrific LA fires, but you're hearing this a few weeks after, so welcome back to me, but not to you. Hopefully you've been around these last few weeks. Anyway, a lot has happened. My God. If you guys watched my episode, I was recording with Gabby Stone, that episode when I had a big bouquet of flowers from a man that was in fact love bombing me. He sure was. Happened again. I'm starting to think maybe I really just enjoy being love bombed. It's all fun and games until it's not. So I'm just going to give you guys the Spark Notes version because this really deserves an entire episode, and I'm going to give it to you next time I record. This man is completely anonymous. Not anybody knows who he is, and I will be changing his name and will not be sharing any identifying features or qualities about him. No, I'm going to be talking about his qualities. I'm not going to give any identifying information about this person. Okay? So I'm going to start off with that so my conscience is clear, and then now here we effing go, because this man came in guns a fucking blazing. He gave me flowers. He was giving me gifts for my kids, making, the red flag that I even caught on to was like the future planning. It's like, oh, come with me here and come with me here, and I want to do this with you, and in April let's go do this. And I'm like, in April? Like, are we this? You think we're going to be together in April? Okay, all right. I wasn't really sure if I liked him because his texting style was very off. Like, he didn't get my jokes. He would heart things and then kind of not keep the conversation going. I couldn't really tell if he liked me, but like in person, we got along well, and his actions were like, I'm like, whoa, this guy really likes me. But then over text, I was kind of like, I don't know. Like, our banter was not there. There were things that were just really not adding up. I ended up finding out that, this person has had a history of drug abuse, but has been clean for like 15 years from what I've gathered, but not in a program. Like, this always kind of is a little bit of a red flag to me when someone's like, oh, I was addicted to like some very intense drug, let's just say heroin, or I'm not going to identify what this man was addicted to, but let's just say heroin. But then now they still drink and like they're not working a program. And I just kind of feel like once you have a substance abuse problem, that part of, see, the thing is, it's like, that was a solution to a symptom for you. When somebody gets addicted to drugs, it's because they're trying to heal something inside of them, and it's just it's a solution for the time being, and it is not a long-term solution, obviously, which is why it ruins people's lives. But anyway, the only reason why I'm bringing this part up is because I'm starting to wonder if maybe he was still on drugs just because of the actions, just because of like, I went on maybe 6 dates with him. When I look back at the 6 dates, I'm like, like the first date he was really calm. The second date he was obsessed with me. He texted me, "Oh, I'm deleting my Raya. I'm so excited about you." And I literally said to him, I was like, "I don't think that's necessary for you to delete your Raya. Like, we've been on 2 dates. And if it's meant to be, it's going to be." Fast forward, I withheld getting sexual with this man until date 6, I think, which, according to my dating coach, was not long enough. And, according to all the data that I've been studying, it is not long enough to create a bond with somebody. This is what ended up happening. We kind of started getting physical. Even just the kissing, I knew it wasn't it, because he's one of those people who really sticks their tongue all the way down your throat, and that's not how I kiss. And it just made me feel like I was there wasn't a whole lot of flow to that. But I'm somebody who's willing to work on things with somebody. I'm like, if that's the least of our problems, then we're good. So we kind of get sexual, whatever. He goes soft halfway through. Now, a woman, I think, always takes offense to that, and we kind of make it about ourselves. And I did that night, and he kind of sent me a text, and he was like, sorry, I'm like feeling a little off, whatever. And I was like, oh my God, don't be sorry. I didn't want him to feel bad. It's a very common thing with men. Ever since that happened, he was like a different person to me. He like pulled back. He wasn't reciprocating via text anymore. He went away on a trip, but anyway, he basically like emotionally ghosted me, but still would kind of like check in, I think probably so that he didn't feel like a complete piece of shit. Anyway, there's a lot more details to this, but let's just say it ended and he blamed it on our chemistry. I'm just going to set the foundation for next week's episode. Started dating a guy. He definitely love bombed me. We got sexual. He got a limp dick halfway through and then blamed it on our chemistry. I'm just going to give you a little spoiler alert. I ended up dumping him. And then when we had a conversation about it, he said that it was the sex. It was our chemistry. Now, that's very offensive to a woman. And I have a question for you guys. Like, if a man goes soft halfway through sex and then blames the chemistry, I'm calling bullshit. So I want to ask all of my listeners to please leave me a voicemail or leave me a comment. Voicemails are more fun. Just letting me know, has that ever happened to you? Have you ever had an awkward sex experience? Was it the nail in the coffin? And did you ever have a man kind of go soft halfway through and then blame it on you, or go soft halfway through and maybe that was an ick for you and you couldn't touch them ever again and you had to leave? I don't know. I feel like I tend to be a little more forgiving of awkward first sex experiences. I don't think I've actually ever had one before. So this was a first for me. Tell me about it. What do you guys think? Okay, I'm taking a really sharp pivot. I have on Sahil Bloom today as a guest. This man has actually been with his wife since he was 15 years old and she was 14. So it's just an interesting dynamic to talk to a man who is happily married, been in a very obviously long-term relationship, and he has not only figured out how to have a happy relationship, but also how to live a life that is fulfilling. And he gives so many tangible takeaways during this episode on, how really to live the best version of yourself. And some things are a little surprising. It's not your usual self-help advice. Sahil gives some, Sahil is an entrepreneur, investor, and he's a writer. He most recently wrote a book called The 5 Types of Wealth. And this is kind of a compilation of the things that I've heard him talk about in the past. A lot of really tangible takeaways on how to be productive professionally, on how to conduct yourself in your relationships, and most importantly, how to live the happiest version of the life that you're leading. So with that, let's welcome Sahil Bloom. Welcome back, everybody. I have Sahil Bloom here, and if you have been around for a while, you know that we actually have had Sahil on before, and we do know a little bit about how you started into this journey of, I mean, you're kind of like a Jay Shetty now, which is like, I feel like that's racist of me to say.
Yeah, no, I was going to say Indian. It's like the brown guy. Yeah.
It's like, you're a brown guy who has a lot of smart things to say. No.
I just wish I had a British accent. I would be so much more successful if I sounded.
You want to know something? And I do love Jay Shetty, but I like won't date people with British accents. Okay. For some reason. I feel like they're faking it. So I have no idea.
I'm convinced that like there is a conspiracy of these like like social media and like influencer gurus that all have these like really refined sounding accents. Like there's Matthew Hussey, there's Jay Shetty, and they all like sound you can say the exact same thing, but it sounds so much more elegant in a British or Australian accent. I'm like, it's not fair. Americans just don't have that same advantage.
100%. Who's that guy? Steven or Steve?
Bartlett.
Yeah,
same
him
thing.
Too. I know. It's like you could literally say anything, and I'd be like, okay.
Yeah, totally. Sounds right. Sounds like it makes sense. That slapped.
100%. Okay, so why don't you give us just a brief rundown of your origin story, and then we'll get into what you're doing today, and then of course you have to impart all of your wisdom on us.
Oh gosh,
that's why we're here.
if I have any wisdom to impart, I'll do my best. I started out my career in the world of finance, spent my early years as like a pretty classic finance bro, just like chasing all of the things that you're told that you should want to chase. I was very, very narrowly focused on, all of the like status things that will make you feel successful. And a lot of that in hindsight was grounded in this like deep-seated insecurity that I feel like I had for the first 30 years of my life.
Like all of us have, by the way.
Do you think that's true?
I definitely think it's true. But also, you went to Stanford, right? I feel like once you're on that kind of trajectory, now you have nobody was looking at me like, what's she going to do next? It's going to be great. I feel like a lot of people were probably looking at you like, we got to see he's going to do really big things.
It's so interesting. It's like, I come from this mixed race family. So my mom is Indian, my dad is white. My parents have a crazy story of meeting. They crossed by 2 weeks. My mom had come over from India for college. My dad was finishing his PhD at Princeton. My mom was working to start paying her way through a master's there. And they had a 2-week window where they crossed over. And my mom was working in the library, saw him, asked him on a date.
Your mom asked him?
My mom asked him on a date. She was very bold. My mom is incredible, super bold individual. Asked him on a date. They went out. And on the first date, my dad said, my father will never accept us. And my mom was so blinded by his use of the word us that she completely missed the message. And unfortunately, he was right, which was my dad's father was not accepting of the idea of him marrying or dating an Indian woman and made him choose between my mom and his family. And my dad walked out the door and never saw his family again.
What was your dad's nationality?
He's from, I guess from a Jewish family, but they weren't practicing Jews. It's crazy in hindsight to think about. This is 1980. So times were maybe a little bit different. But I never met my dad's parents. He has 3 siblings I've never met.
Wow, so they were serious.
I have first cousins I've never met. Totally crazy. And, it was like, I think it was a power thing in hindsight, frankly, that like the idea of his eldest son, like his golden child, betraying his will and like going off and making his own life was just too much for his father to accept. And he was like, he's not a good man.
Well,
let's be clear.
He's got some issues.
Totally. But just such a sad thing. But the legacy of that was that like my parents and their love and the relationship they had and the support that they provided, I felt, to my sister and I, was this ripple effect that was really amazing. The point of that, though, is to say I have an older sister who's 3.5 years older than me. And she was extraordinarily high achieving academically. And I was kind of the like ne'er-do-well younger brother that was just playing sports. And I started creating this story in my mind that I wasn't smart. That my sister was the smart one and I wasn't smart. And the stories we tell ourselves are the most powerful thing in the world, because they govern how we interact with everything around us. And those stories end up creating your external reality. And if you tell yourself a negative story about who you are and what you're capable of, you will just find evidence around you that confirms that story. And you'll ignore everything that would break it. And so for most of my life, I started building up this insecurity of like, I'm not the smart one. I have to chase these things to make myself feel good in other ways. Sports, or trying to get the high status job, or whatever the thing was that I thought would kind of like fill me internally because I didn't feel good.
Yeah, that's so interesting too, because it just goes to show you how relative our version of ourselves are in our head, just by who we surround ourselves with. And I know you have something that you talk about with like the people you surround yourself with and how they dictate the outcomes of your life. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, there is scientific evidence that the people you surround yourself with determine your outcomes. The Pygmalion Effect is the term for this behavioral phenomenon that says that we actually rise to the level of expectations that others have for us. So if you surround yourself with people who think you are capable of more, who believe in you, who encourage you, who push you to think bigger, you will actually rise to the level of those expectations. And similarly, if you surround yourself with people who belittle you, who tell you to be realistic, who laugh at your ambitions, you will fall to the level of those expectations. So it's a reminder that there is scientific evidence to say that the people you choose to surround yourself with is arguably the most important decision you will ever make. You have to choose wisely around that, because you get one shot at this.
Yeah.
And allowing those people into your energy and into your space is a bad, bad way to live.
Totally. And I even think of that in a parenting context, because I've heard people say before, I heard this one woman, she was like, I was always a really good kid in high school. And when I think back at it, it's because I was always overhearing my mom say to other people, oh, my daughter's so good. Like, she's such a good girl. She would never do anything, but she's always like making the right choices. And she asked her mom about that years later, and her mom was like, oh, I did that on purpose. Because you kind of become, and I catch myself being like, that's my picky eater, and she's my good eater, and he's my loud one, and she's my quiet. When your parents kind of tell you who you are, I think you almost morph into that.
That's so interesting. It is an example of, it's exactly like a derivative of that idea of the stories we tell ourselves.
Right.
And it's the concept there that there's this idea of the narrative fallacy that humans are storytelling creatures. We try to create a story around anything we see to make sense of the world. And then any information we get, we try to fit it into a story that we understand already.
Yeah.
And so if you are told you're the good kid and you keep hearing your mom saying that, you'll start to act and find evidence to confirm that. So that's a cool way of thinking about with your kids, just incept these really positive stories about who they are and use positive words, even around areas where they may not be in the traditional definition of what is a good kid. You could say this is my really creative one rather than saying this is good, the one. Yeah, exactly. You wonder what kind of impact that has. And on the point of the people you surround yourself with, one thing that I feel I've encountered, particularly over the last few years and just going on a bit of a different path, is there is a really challenging thing that happens when you step off the traditional map or path to success that everyone wants you to follow. Mm-hmm. And that is, you experience these long periods of loneliness as part of that transformation that you are going through. And something that's been really empowering to me that I think will help someone out there is just the idea that those periods of loneliness are a tax, if you will, on your personal transformation. They are actually the cost of entry for that transformation you want to go through, for that growth that you want to experience. Because by definition, as you change and as you develop, you are no longer going to fit into the environment that you previously occupied.
Right.
Those people, you're not going to speak the same language as them. You're going to have moments where the people that you once got along with, they don't even hear you. They don't understand the things you care about, your values, your missions, your goals. There's just going to be this fundamental misalignment, and you have yet to attract the new people.
Right. You're like a snail, but you haven't found your new shell yet. And you're like, uh-oh, and nobody's confirming that you're doing the right thing around you.
And it is so, so lonely. And it's important to know when you're in those periods that it's natural and that it's part of the process that you're trying to go through. This is the growth that you asked for in your life, and this is part of that growth. You have to go through that.
Yeah, that it actually reminds me, I had this Jewish mysticism Kabbalah master, David Guillaume, on
he's
here.
Great.
Yeah, and he said something like, the way the waves pull back before they come forward, it's there's always going to be that little, that lull before something big happens. It's just sticking it through, because I think a lot of times during those uncomfortable moments is when we kind of second guess and course correct and we pull too soon. We pull away too soon. Yeah,
the most dangerous person in the world is the person who can continue to show up and be disciplined even when the rewards are uncertain. Mm-hmm. Tolerance for uncertainty is one of the single most important traits in the world, because if you can continue to show up and put in the work on those days when it's not clear to you that it's going to pay off, when that wave has pulled back, if you can continue to show up and do the thing, be reliable, you will eventually win.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to do. It's so easy to say, and it's so important to just have one person, two people in your life that you feel like can give you that little boost on those days when it's dark. I
was just thinking, one of my really good friends, Katrina Scott, a lot of people know her, she and her husband work together kind of all the time, and she just had a baby. I feel on the days when she's kind of down, he picks up her slack and vice versa. And I'm a single person, so it's easy for me to be like, well, I don't have anybody like that, so I'm setting the bar really low. But if anything, it's just I have this information, I feel like she's lucky that she has that, but I can find that in a friend, or I can find that in somebody. I think we all can find somebody who's gonna hold us accountable and just remind us But it is easy when the person lives with you and sees you every day.
Yeah, and if you want to find that person, be that person to someone else.
Yeah.
I always think that, like, the things you put out into the world, you end up receiving in return. And you can call that karma or energy or whatever you want to call it. But it is the truth that if you make a consistent practice out of letting people know when you think something good about them, just on a daily basis, like make a plan to send one text a day to someone that you maybe haven't talked to in a while or someone you were thinking about, to just give them the like, keep going kind of nudge on the back. You will start getting texts like that after a week. Wow. I can almost guarantee it. Like I have a friend who, actually Kristen is a good example of this, like who was on this journey, was like experiencing, I know, like a lot of the challenges that we've all experienced on these journeys of loneliness and feeling like you don't have your people yet. And I sent her a text once just saying like, hey, keep going. Like, liked the thing that you just sent out, whatever it was. Tiny little thing, took me 2 seconds. I know how that makes you feel when you when you get that from someone. And it can be the nudge that encourages you to go do the one more thing. And then you show up a little bit differently with your kids, with your husband, with your friends. You're more likely to do that to someone else. It creates this cool chain reaction. And I think it's totally free to be that to somebody else.
That's true. And you're not doing it for the reward, but if you're going to get that back, then it sounds like it's a win-win.
I mean, that's the reality of life, is like when you give with no expectation of return, you end up generating the best returns, which is kind of like this funny paradox of the world.
Totally. Yeah. Man, that's a lot. That's a lot to take in, because especially as somebody, and I know a lot of people are like this, but I feel like I need to understand, and I need to understand why people do the things they do and what the big picture is, and a lot of times there's more wisdom in just being like, I'm not capable of understanding it right now. That
reminds me of this amazing story. It's an old Buddhist story of a man who gets shot by a poisoned arrow, and he's lying on the ground, and someone comes and is like, I'm going to go get a doctor to save you and get this poison arrow out. And the man says, no, wait. First, I need to know who shot this arrow. Yeah. What's the arrow made out of? What actually is the poison that's on it? Where did it come from? Where was the man from? And while he's asking all these questions, he dies. And the story is a lesson in that exact fact, which is like, sometimes you just need to do the thing, not ruminate on it, not think about all the causes and why it's happening to you and what the situation is. Sometimes the answer is found in the action itself.
The answer is found in the action itself. That's like, like act before you think kind of thing. Wow, I like that.
Have you ever heard, do you know Rumi, the ancient poet? You would love Rumi. Okay, so Rumi, I have this quote in the book. It's one of my favorite quotes of all time. As you start to walk on the way appears. So that's that whole idea that we often seek to over-engineer everything in our own lives. We'll like stand where we are and try to plan out this perfect course from A to B. And the reality is you can't, because you don't know what anything is going to look like. The best opportunities in life are invisible. You have to unveil them by actually starting to walk. You have to start to walk the way, and then the way appears. Right,
which is almost counterintuitive. It's not really what we hear from society. Society is like, how prepared are you? How much planning have you been doing? And it makes you feel like you're unqualified or like ill-equipped to start the path that you want to start on. And that's why I feel like everybody thinks they're not ready.
Yeah, and I think that distinction is an important one, actually. So planning is based on the expectation of order. Planning is all about, okay, I'm going to set up a whole plan, and I'm going to expect that everything is going to be calm, that the seas are going to be perfectly calm, and I'm going to get my plan from point A to point B. Preparation is based on the expectation of chaos. Preparation is you are being prepared so that when the storms come, you're going to be able to adapt on the fly. Preparation beats planning 10 out of 10 times.
Interesting. Okay, so prepare, don't plan.
Yes, I'm a big believer in that. It's like Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
And it's totally true. It's like you need to, life is going to punch you in the mouth. We've all felt that. And the whole goal in life is to take the punch and be able to punch back and be able to navigate and dodge and duck and do your thing.
Right.
And that comes from being prepared, not from having the perfect plan.
And I feel like in my own life, what I've noticed about being prepared is really just like, have I drank enough water? Did I sleep well? Did I go to yoga? Just knowing that in my body I feel grounded and strong. that's more lethal and productive for me than, having any kind of a plan, which I rarely do anyway.
Yeah. Man plans, God laughs. There's a reason that's such a good saying. It's very, very true. Every single time I've tried to have this perfect plan, it's inevitably gone awry. Even with stupid stuff, my wife always wants to make these elaborate, really perfect plans for family occasions. Mm-hmm. And she builds them up in her mind as this really okay, this is all going to go perfectly according to plan with this thing. And it never does, because family is chaos, and your family's annoying in different ways. That's just the reality of family, especially when you get everyone together. And I have an Indian mother who likes to harass me still, I'm 10. And so the reality is that you need to be prepared for the chaos, not try to plan.
Yeah. 100%. So tell me about the family life a little bit. I know you have one son.
Yeah, one son so far.
And then I read that you have struggled with infertility with your wife, and talk about that a little bit, speaking of planning and when your plans don't work out.
Yeah, we in maybe 2019 we had started trying to conceive, and this is really a topic that people, especially men, don't talk about. Mm-hmm. It tends to be a burden that I think women carry and suffer with in silence, unfairly so, because scientifically it's often the man's fault in the actual science of infertility. And it was this really challenging cycle of every month you're waiting for that moment, and then the letdown, and then this tension and the strain that it creates. And, in hindsight, it's hard for me to... and I haven't really talked about this before, but in hindsight, I really do think it was a burden I should have been carrying, because I was not in a place mentally, emotionally, or stress to conceive. And I think scientifically there's clear evidence that stress levels impact fertility. I was in a place in my life at that time where I was chasing all of these external things, money, status, trying to sound impressive. And a lot of other areas of my life were really suffering. I mean, I was drinking 6-7 nights a week. I was, not physically healthy, mentally definitely not. My relationships were struggling with my parents, my sister. This was creating strain with my wife. And it was an incredible turn and journey, because we made this big change in May 2021. We decided to uproot our whole life that we'd built in California, move 3,000 miles to live closer to our families. I left my job that I was working at that had all this status and money. And within 2 weeks of getting to the East Coast, we found out that my wife was pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And it was one of those moments in life when you just feel like God winked at you.
Yeah, you're like, okay, I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah, you did something, and energy fell into the right place, whatever you want to call it, but life fell into place. Yeah. And that, to me, was just a sign of yes, we were marching down the right path. Yeah. And I feel a duty personally to speak about it more publicly, because there are a lot of people out there that are suffering with this kind of thing in silence. There are a lot of men out there who need to look themselves in the mirror and be there alongside their wife or partner in a way that they haven't been, and shoulder the burden as much as possible.
I actually just heard something. I forget who was saying this, but it was a well-established doctor, OBGYN, and she was talking about how the male sperm actually dictates the health of the placenta, and that a lot of issues during pregnancy, like preeclampsia, which I always thought was a woman's issue, that she wasn't, either she was overweight or had poor blood pressure, that's actually dictated by the health of the man. So it's why are we just hearing about this now?
I know that feels like a big thing.
Yeah, that does feel like a big thing. And also just, I think it's, it's not, I'm not blaming the man because they didn't know either, but I don't even think men know what they can do differently to be more healthy and, before trying to conceive. Because women, it's we're supposed to be taking our prenatals for 6 weeks even prior to getting pregnant, because, it's too late once you're pregnant to start taking them at that point. But like, I don't know, men need to be doing stuff too.
Yeah, and I
evidently.
just don't think it's talked. And it's like the idea of prenatal vitamins for men should be a thing just as much, right? Like you should be getting your internal body in order to create something in the external world. And it makes sense in any other world, like in any other space that you go into, you would think about the man preparing for this thing. And the health of your own body and your own mind during the process of trying to conceive is going to impact this child.
Yeah.
And you know, and your ability to conceive. And so I think male fertility is probably a space that is going to grow really rapidly as more people become aware of some of the science around it. But also just from an actual like emotional and psychological perspective, one of the real challenges of it is this thing of like, I think of it as like the it's like the looking paradox. It's like this idea that when you're looking for something really hard, you never find it. And when you stop looking, the thing finds you.
100%.
And the thing with infertility and that whole process is you get into this cycle of like really, you're like pushing, you're chasing this thing, and you create this adversarial relationship with it, almost this tension, this stress. And we know that stress impacts our ability to conceive. And so it creates this vicious cycle, I think, for a lot of people. And I just hope, I hope that people are able to kind of create a more positive and like, I don't know even what the word is, just like open relationship with the idea that like these things will come to you when you allow yourself to kind of create the space around them.
Yeah, I remember hearing that when because I had a few miscarriages, and I remember a lot of people, especially like, you know, people like my mom and my sister being like, well, it's because you're so stressed. That's why you're not going to get pregnant. And I just remember being like, you are the most annoying person in the world, because anybody could be like, well, just like be more relaxed, then it'll happen. But for a lot of people, it is more complex than that. And I think having, you know, just having an open mind that maybe it's something the man's doing and not something the woman's doing is like, I think
I would
alone.
guess it's like a lot of the time, honestly. I mean, it's why I say that is because I just think there's this like natural default to assuming that it's something with the woman.
Right.
And obviously if you're going through treatments, then they test the sperm and you go and you can actually have a whole process around it to understand. But there's a lot of benefit just from a relationship standpoint with the two of you and from like your journey together with this thing that is so important to recognizing that this isn't a burden for one person to carry. This is a team. This is an us versus a problem that we are trying to solve.
Totally. So let's talk about 500 plus years of relationship wisdom. What's that all about?
Yeah. I on our anniversary a couple of years ago, I went around for about a month prior to our anniversary. And we've been together since she was 14 years old. I was 15.
Wild. That is wild.
Yeah, you don't hear about those stories anymore.
No, never.
That's very like 70s, 80s.
Extinct.
Yeah. Well, now like we live in this, I mean, I could go on and on about this like paradox of choice issue that we have with social media now, that you just have infinite choices at your fingertips. And we know scientifically, the paradox of choice, that more choices actually make us less satisfied with whatever we choose. And like you go to a grocery store and if you have 2 options for eggs and you pick one of them, you're more satisfied than if you have 100 options and you pick one of them. Even though you would think that more options makes you happier, it doesn't.
Oh, wow. I need to sit with that for a second. Now I'm thinking about my dating apps. I'm thinking about, there really are just so many options.
It's crazy to think. I mean, it is definitively true that happens. More options actually makes you less happy with whatever option you choose, which is crazy. I kind of
feel like that might be more of a man thing, though. I would like to see the data on men versus women.
That's interesting.
I do think, I don't know, though. There's a lot of conflicting information because I feel like as a woman, and what I hear from all of my female friends is like when we pick a guy, and I'm talking women who, you know, are dating in their 30s and 40s. Like if we pick a guy where we can settle on that, and in a way where sometimes we can almost just look at like kind of push all the red flags away and stick with that choice, where I feel like men are more likely to, like, they're running on adrenaline and dopamine. There's a lot of love bombing, and then when they feel like they got all the dopamine they can out of you, then they want to move on to the next person. There's a lot of chronic daters that I'm seeing, that men that are in their 30s and 40s and 50s. And I don't see the same thing with women. But then if you look at the divorce data, women are more likely to leave a relationship than men.
That's interesting. Isn't there, I feel like I saw a statistic recently of different couples, and it was like male-female relationships in the United States have like a 50% divorce rate. Male-male relationships, I think, have like a 20% divorce rate. And female-female relationships have like female-female relationships have an 80% divorce rate.
Okay, well, that I have a whole different theory on. There's way too many hormones there. I
need to find the actual. We can put it in the show notes. I think I like recently saw this in like Axios or somewhere like that put it out as like it was a news blotter on it. That was just, it was fascinating to me how strikingly different it was across male versus female.
That is interesting, and it aligns with the data that I saw. Well, and the data that you're saying now. It's like one man and one woman, the woman is more likely to end the relationship. So if you put two women together, the likelihood now of one of them ending the relationship is higher.
But you wonder why the woman ended it? Because I think in the United States, divorce, I think the two highest causes, one is infidelity. So if the woman is ending it because of infidelity, it's like, okay, rightfully so.
That was my situation.
And then I think the second highest is money problems, which you often wonder whether those two are correlated in some way too, like whether infidelity was stemmed from money problems too. So like maybe money problems is higher.
It's so complicated because also I did hear that like male gay couples have higher earnings than any other couple. So if they're doing well financially, then that takes that element off the table. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they're not leaving each other.
Yeah, and you wonder whether just like concepts of monogamy or polygamy are like differently accepted across different types of relationships and whether that impacts rates too.
I have heard
I don't know.
Gay male couples that there is more openness, but not all couples.
Yeah. You wonder whether it's different rates than like in a normal heterosexual traditional society relationship.
It's so complicated, but
I shouldn't say that. You should cut that out.
I will cut it.
Cut me saying traditional society relationships or normal relationship.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that. Thank you. I'd rather not.
Yeah, we don't want to go there. But regardless of the dynamic of the couple in terms of two women, two men, a man and a woman, I do feel like across the board, the more options you have, probably the least satisfied you're going to be.
Well, it's like this, social media has made us an eject button culture, meaning we press the eject button on things so quickly when we know that we can just like at the touch of a button have a million other things of that same sort. And so like in a relationship, if you just think about it naturally, deep relationships are built through shared struggle. Scientifically, shared struggle releases oxytocin, which creates feelings of love and connection. That is actually what builds this deep connection with someone. It is crawling through the mud with someone. That is the growing in love. And so if you live in this world where as soon as something gets hard in a relationship, you can press the eject button because at the touch of a button, you can have 100 other options waiting right in front of you. Yeah, you're never going to get to that deep relationship because you hit the eject button before you went through the thing that was going to build the deep relationship.
And even more so on that, and I learned this from a podcast I was on called, what was the one? I Wish You Knew. I refer to this podcast all the time because there's one guy who's like he's a psychologist and he knows about all of the attachment styles. But like when a man and a woman has sex, oxytocin is released by the woman, but not the man. So that's why a woman and a man, like a woman bonds very strongly when you have sex. So think about like having sex too early in a relationship before you've had those shared struggles where the man is able to release the bonding hormone of oxytocin. So I think that's why you see a lot of men kind of like leaving the relationship after, the love bombing is done and he gets kind of the sex and then now the dopamine has kind of burned out and the woman is left being like, but we're bonded. And he's like, but we're not. So it was data that they were using to prove that for a woman, you really should wait to have sex because you need to get past the point of shared struggle where the man is now kind of bonded.
That's so interesting. It is. I mean, it's like it's yet another example of how I think that something good, which is like the connectedness that social media has provided, has gone bad when taken in excess. It's like that phrase, the dose makes the poison. Like anything good in moderation can be really bad in excess. Yeah. And social media is that. I mean, in all of these different areas of life, every single thing you want in life is on the other side of something that sucks. And with relationships, it's like hard conversations, struggle. No one wants to go through that, but you have your great relationship on the other side of crawling through that mud. Right. If you want to like build an incredible healthy body, you have to go through a bunch of hard workouts and a bunch of bland meals. If you want to build a business, you have to do hundreds of hours of focused work. All of those things are on the other side of something hard. And so if you live in a world where social media has convinced you that you can just press the eject button very quickly and just go on to the next thing, you never endure enough of that pain to get that, like, that is the cost of entry to get the thing that you want on the other side.
Yeah. But what about a relationship that you've had since you were 14? What are some things people can implement in their relationship to keep it?
Oh, yeah, and this goes back to the
exciting.
500 years of wisdom, which we got derailed from.
Yeah.
So I went and talked to a bunch of couples who have been married for 40 or 50 years. Basically like from 70-year-olds on through a 100-year-old couple, and asked them what relationship advice they would give to their younger selves. And I share a longer list of these in the book. But there were a handful that were just amazing. One person talked about the fact that it can't always be 50-50 in a relationship. This idea that it always needs to be 50-50 is just a lie, because sometimes it's going to be 90-10,
right.
Sometimes it's going to be 10-90, but the point is that it just has to add up to 100. You need to make sure that you have that kind of partnership where it does add up in that way. Another person said never keep score in love. Keeping score is for ball games. I loved that one. And then one of my favorite ones was just the idea of making sure you take care of your needs before worrying about your partner. Like, put on your oxygen mask first in life. I think it's very easy in relationships and as a parent to allow the needs of another to completely transcend your own, and you lose yourself in that.
I think maybe women, unless you're a different breed of man, but I see that with, and I have a little chip on my shoulder with men, I guess, right now. But I feel like I see women being that martyr a lot, especially with kids.
Oh, 100%.
But I feel like men are, at least the men that I've always like grown up with and surrounded myself with, I feel like they have more of that built-in boundary. Like their boundaries are more firm. Do you not feel that way?
I would call it selfishness rather than boundary. Probably. I think it's like a harsher term for the exact same thing. It's like, I don't think I think most men have a naturally more egotistical perspective on the world. And I think, again, social media, I think, has convinced you over and over again as a man that, like, that is the way to be a strong, masculine man, is to place your needs first, and you, like, stand in front of the household and protect her. And I would agree with you. I think it is. I think that is a real message for women, is to make sure that you still are taking care of yourself. Especially, fundamentally, you cannot take care of someone else unless you are taking care of yourself. Right. And if you are placing the needs of your partner, of your child, completely in front of your own, and you're not able to take care of your own mental and physical health in the way that you need to, you will not be able to show up in the way that you want to for your family unit. And so, as a man, if you're listening to this, make sure that you actually create the space necessary for your partner to do that. And like, I took that after my son was born as a real duty, that I had to make sure that I carved out the space for my wife to be able to have her non-negotiables, like the things that she really needed to be able to do on a daily basis. Whatever those were, we could talk about them and make sure that we had the space, that she had the space to do those things. And if not, we needed to adjust things, and I would need to make sure that we could create that space. Because otherwise, you just start to lose yourself in those.
I think that's a real, strong tool, especially for allowing women to be in their feminine and a man to be in his masculine, which that's a little traditional of me, but I think it's so important in a relationship that the man really does need to create the space for the woman to be able to give so much of herself to just the family, to the family unit. And the same thing with the woman, to be supportive. But I also feel like you said, it's never going to be 50-50. You know, when a woman just has a baby, I think a lot of times men they feel shunned or jealous, or kind of like they've been thrown to the wayside. But that's just one of those times where, like, maybe the man's going to have to step up a little bit and realize that he's not going to be getting as much attention for a little while. And then it changes. I
have this idea in the book of what I call a life dinner. And it's particularly important after a child is born, but I think it's an amazing practice for any couple to use in their relationship. And it comes from this entrepreneur named Brad Feld. And basically the idea is once a month, you create sort of a fixed date where you'll go to your favorite place, you make your favorite meal, and you create a natural touch point for talking about some of the bigger picture things in your lives and in your relationship. You like zoom out and talk about different goals, opportunities, things that you're wrestling with that are kind of tough, challenges, whatever it is. And each person kind of gets a chance to talk about it, and then you talk about it together. And it's a really amazing practice because when chaos starts happening in life and when you have a whole bunch, child, all these new considerations, whatever changes are happening, it's very easy to lose that touch point. And when you might have normally just been able to do that on the fly on a daily basis, you forget to connect on that higher level and zoom out and see the bigger picture of where you're trying to go. And so it's a really cool way to just kind of actually schedule that and have it as a firm stake in the ground every single month.
Yeah, I do. I love that zooming out. It's so easy to get caught up in just surviving and the day-to-day details. And then forget, what direction are we even? Why am I going in this direction?
Yeah. And especially in the few months after a kid is born. I mean, it's craziness, and no one's sleeping enough. And, there's a variety of reasons why it's so hard. But I think creating those touch points, that's a broader rule for life, too. I mean, it's the whole mental wealth section of this book is ideas for forcing yourself to zoom out in your life, to actually go and see the bigger picture. And that's not just your relationships, that's also you personally thinking about some of the bigger picture questions in your life. I mean, one of my absolute favorite questions to ask yourself is, if you were the main character in a movie of your life, what would the audience be screaming at you to do right now?
I love this so much.
We've all watched a movie or TV
and
show,
like,
and you
don't do it!
you want to just jump and you're like, don't go to the airport, chase the girl, or don't go down there. And you are that main character in a movie of your life, and the audience would be screaming something at you right now.
Right.
What is it? What is the thing that is blindingly obvious from the outside that you are choosing to ignore?
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I can think of a few probably for me right now. Probably my biggest thing is, and we talked about this earlier too, it's that planning versus being prepared. I think I spend a whole lot of energy kind of trying to make things happen and orchestrate, and I'm going to make these kind of dates because I want to find somebody, and I need to treat it like a job. But, and I end up, I think, expending a lot of energy in trying to make things happen, thinking that it'll only happen if I orchestrate it. And then I'm tired, and and then I've gone on too many dates, and I have wine at every date, and then I'm drinking too much, and all, I'm not taking care of myself, and then I'm feeling guilty because I haven't put my kids to bed 3 nights this week because I've been going on dates. That's currently this week. I've been and also just the energy that other people kind of take from you. I've realized, I think this is an individual thing, but with me, I really take on other people's energy. So the more I'm around people and I'm meeting new people all the time, I feel very depleted. And I need to just I think the audience would be screaming at me to do less, take care of yourself, and everything that is meant for you will come to you. But it's such a hard thing to do, to kind of release that grip on life, feeling like nothing good is going to happen unless I make it happen.
It's the classic ambitious person's dilemma. You're are you type A in general?
I mean, I'm pretty solid type B. If you look in my car, you'll be like, who's cleaning?
That's interesting.
Around here?
That's interesting. I think ambitious people struggle the most with. I really think that the greatest challenge in the world for an ambitious person is to reframe zooming out, space, and rest as a part of your performance, not as a reward for your efforts.
100%. I don't think I'm type A in the sense of organized and my phone's always dying and my car is almost dead all the time, but I hold myself to a very high standard, and I'm very self-critical. if I am on the couch watching TV, I don't think I've ever done that guilt-free, you know? And I think it's part of upbringing too, where like my dad would be like, what are you doing? Go for a run, or, you know, something like that. Like just feeling like you need to be productive all the time. Otherwise the world is slipping through your fingers and you're, you know, the early bird gets the worm kind of thing.
We need to learn to fight back against that.
We totally do.
I by the way, my natural wiring is very similar, but I've also found over the last few years that the greatest outcomes that I've achieved have all been a result of deliberately creating more space in my life to be able to think. And to be able to just slow down. And actually, when you slow down, what happens is you're not getting less done. You're actually able to see the most interesting things that you should be focusing your energy on. And if you don't ever slow down, you can't see those things. There's like, you know, the analogy is like in soccer, you know, like Lionel Messi is like one of the best players of all time. And he literally spends the entire game walking around the field. People freak out about it. Like if you search Lionel Messi walking on Google, you'll get like 500,000 hits. All of these articles bemoaning that he's lazy, that he does all these things. But it's actually part of his strategy. He walks around because then he creates this map of the entire field, and he's able to see in the exact right moment, in the exact right spot, where to be so that he can score. Right. And our lives are exactly the same. If you spend all your time running around, you never get to see the entire map, and you can never identify those things that are going to be the ones that might change your life.
And you're too tired when it's time to strike, probably.
Yeah, you're too tired, and you just can't see it because everything's a blur. I mean, like I think about that in my own life. When you're running around back-to-back meetings for the entire day, you know, like filled social calendar, saying yes to things a month from now that you end up, it comes and you're like, why did I say yes to this, which we all do. You never get to, you actually miss the really interesting thing that comes across because you don't have the space, you don't have the headspace or the bandwidth to actually go and do it.
Yeah. I need to start putting in my calendar, like, universe time, like this is time that the universe gets to pick what's going to happen.
Do the think day. There's a thing in the book in the mental wealth section that I call the think day, which is like you can start, just take 2 hours once a month, and there's like these question prompts that you can walk through. Just take 2 hours once a month, bring like a journal, go to like a coffee shop or like somewhere nice outside that you like, and just think on some of these questions, journal on them, think on them. I guarantee you will feel this dramatic shift in your life just doing it once. You create a monthly practice out of it, it'll change your life.
What are the type of questions I'm answering?
The main character one is a great one. Another one of my favorites is, if I were to repeat this day for 100 straight days, would my life be better or worse?
Wow.
Because it's very easy to ignore the compound effect of the actions that we're actually taking on a daily basis, and forcing yourself to have clarity around the fact that, like, well, my future is just dictated by what I am doing today. So is my day today going to be positive or negative on the journey? A third one that I absolutely love is, if someone were to come and watch me for a week, what would they say my priorities are? Rationale here is, there are two types of priorities in life. There are the priorities we say we have, and then there are the priorities our actions show we have.
Wow.
And there's often a big gap between the two, for most people, myself included. And the goal in life is to close that gap so that what we say our priorities are is reflected in the actions that we take on a daily basis. Asking yourself that question and forcing yourself to think about it from a third party's perspective will help you start to close that gap, start to adjust your actions so that they're in line with the things that you actually do care about.
Yeah, I know they would say, okay, her kids are her priority, are a big priority. Then it would probably be like her hair and her makeup and her clothes. They'd be like not cleaning up her space. But then I think one thing that I feel like is a discrepancy for me is I say I'm so health focused. You know, I work out a lot, and I think a lot about my health, but I don't really eat well. Like, I skip meals a lot. I'm usually just, you know, I do not eat consistently well, and I don't really have an excuse for it. A lot of times it's just, that's kind of the planning preparedness thing. You know, I think I could do a better job planning and being prepared for like what I put in my body, you know?
Yeah, and then the cool thing is, once you identify that, it's just like take some tiny action to improve it a little bit.
Right.
Like, you don't need to change the world in one day. You don't need to like, okay, now I'm going to be Brian Johnson or Andrew Huberman and I'm going to have these a million health protocols. Like, just do the one little thing, whatever it might be. Maybe it's like, okay, I'm just going to make sure that my breakfasts this week are like locked in. I kind of know what I'm going to have. I have a recipe that I like to make, or a shake or whatever it is. And use that to start creating the momentum that'll ultimately change your world.
I love that. Wow.
So do a think day. I'm going to text you and follow up on it.
I'm totally
because now I want you to do it. Because creating a little bit more space in your life really will change it.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I feel that 100%. Okay, so we talked about the, I'm going to mess this up.
Pygmalion Effect.
Pygmalion Effect. That's who you surround yourself with. Okay, let's talk about, we can cut all these little parts out too. Mental time travel, we already did that one. Let's talk about, okay, tell me about what's the surfer mentality concept.
Ooh. This is actually really related to an idea that we were just talking about as it relates to life. Like, you know, when you were talking about how you are engaged with the world, you were saying that you really like to push and you're trying to make things happen and do things, and it sometimes creates stress for you or anxiety when things aren't working in the way that we think they should. The surfer mentality is the idea that when a surfer gets up on a wave, they enjoy the present moment, even though they know that the wave is eventually going to end and it might crash down on them after. They're actually just able to enjoy this wave with the knowledge and awareness that there's always more waves coming. And that idea is a very positive concept for your life. To just embrace whatever wave you're on and to know that you are going to have waves of destruction, you're going to have waves of pain, of suffering, of challenge, but those waves will eventually end, and you will have waves of beauty and of growth and of creation to follow. But to just allow yourself the space and allow yourself the peace to just ride whatever wave you're on.
Right, because if you try to get off the wave early, you're going to get hurt.
Yeah, and you have to know that you can't catch any waves if you're sitting on the shore.
That's true.
You have to put yourself into the water. And sometimes that's going to hurt. Sometimes there is going to be pain and struggle associated with that. But it's the only way to live your life, is to have the courage to actually put yourself out there.
Yeah, I love that. Energy calendar idea? What's an energy calendar idea?
You would like this because you're an energy person.
Oh, yes. I am an energy person.
This is a very simple exercise for very quickly defining what is creating energy versus draining energy from your life. The reason I think that's so important is because if you are spending your time on things that are lifting you up energetically, you're going to have the best outcomes. That applies to people just as much as your work. If you're working on things that really create energy for you, you're going to do a much better job on those things. And so the problem is, most people have no idea what is creating energy versus draining energy. They don't think about their life or their time that way. So the energy calendar is, at the end of a weekday, color code your calendar according to whether something was energy creating, meaning it made you feel good, lifted you up during and after, mark it green. If it was neutral, mark it yellow. And if it drained your energy, if you felt physically drained by it, mark it red. If you do that for a week, at the end of a week, you have a very clear visual perspective of the types of activities that created energy in your life versus drained energy from your life. And what you can do with that is slowly start to make changes so that you have more of your calendar filled by these green energy creators, and you lean away from the things that are draining your energy, or you make subtle shifts to them to make them more neutral or energy creating. If you do that, your entire world starts to change. You will feel better at the end of a day and at the end of a week. You'll be working on things that actually lift you up. You'll be leaning away from those relationships that are sucking your energy. You'll be leaning into the ones that are creating it for you. But creating that calendar actually just gives you the awareness that is the start of being able to make those changes.
Yeah. Also, it's probably important to note the things that maybe give you energy in the moment. I'm thinking like going out and getting drinks. It's like, seems like maybe it's fun, but let's think back. Like, did that actually give me energy, or did it create, you know, pain the next day? Yeah,
during and after. That's the important piece. It's like, and like a workout may be really tiring, but if you feel incredible after, that's an energy creator.
Yeah.
But a very good way to just think about your life and to get a better sense of like, time is less important than energy often. We conflate the two and we assume that the two are equivalent.
Yeah.
But the reality is that if I'm like, I could spend an hour with you, but if I'm sitting here on my phone, we're not going to feel connected or, present in any way, versus 5 minutes of me truly focused on you, true energy and in your presence, will feel very connected. And actually, it's crazy. There is scientific evidence that having your phone out in front of someone reduces feelings of connection during the conversation.
God.
Not even looking at it, just
it's
on
like,
the table.
Oh, if I needed to, I could be distracted.
It's like this thing that sucks both of your attention. And they did a study on this exact thing of having your phone out on a table when you talk to someone reduces the feelings of connection you have after the conversation.
I feel like I know what that is, because it's like that the person at any moment could they have another option or something.
Yeah. And we know that feeling too of like the it like lights up a little bit. And no matter what, because it's a drug and we're all addicted to it in our different ways, you look. So even if you're really focused in the conversation, you'll see me, like I'll be here and my phone's out and I'll be like, and then you'll think like, oh, they're not into this conversation. They're focused. They're looking for an escape hatch, the eject button, whatever it is. And that reduces these feelings of connection that you would have. So put your phones away.
Yeah. Oh my God. I know. It makes me feel so guilty with my kids too, especially just this morning. Like I was getting everybody ready for school, but then I'm like kind of on my phone because I had to post this thing. And my daughter literally said to me, and my like heart sunk. She was like, I can't wait to be a grown-up so I can get a phone, because she sees me thinking like, oh, you're choosing your phone over me. Your phone must be really great. You know?
I do this all the time too.
Like, oh my God.
This is one of my biggest struggles, honestly, is like we work on our phones a lot, and I work at home for the most part. I'm writing and doing things. And so I try to be good about it, but you can't always be. No. And your kids pick up on it. Like, having your phone in between you and them, it's like it creates this barrier.
Yeah, totally.
Something to work on for all of us.
Okay, so what's the future for Sahil Bloom? What's your goal?
I'm not a planner, as I said, so I'm very prepared, but I'm not planning. No, I in all seriousness, I no longer plan my life in almost any way, because, like I used to be big on these 5-year plans, 10-year plans, like whole vision for the future. And the funny thing now is 5 years ago, if you had asked me where I would be in 5 years, I could have written out 100 scenarios and not a single one of them would have been right.
Right.
Because the most interesting opportunities are invisible, and you have to start walking in order to find them. And so now I'm just really focused on like 100 days. Like I know what I'm going to be doing for 100 days, which is I'm trying to spread these ideas out in the world. The book comes out. I'm really excited. We're doing a book tour. It's going to be a blast. After that, I just want to be open and create enough space in my life that I can go and pursue whatever interesting things come.
Yeah.
The immediate future, I need to make sure that I have like a season of balance, because I'm right now in a season of unbalance, really pushing this. And that idea of like, you don't need to be balanced every single day of your life.
Right.
It's okay to go through seasons of unbalance as long as you have an awareness that you are trying to create a season of balance. It's like micro versus macro balance. And you don't need to stress over having this season of unbalance. That is necessary, and sometimes it's a great thing for what you're trying to create for the future. But I need to make sure that I create that season of balance with my wife and with my son, and re-find all of our family time together on the back end of this.
Oh, well, it's great to see that, obviously all the wisdom that's in this book is proven right here by you and everything that you've been able to accomplish over the last, this book took you 3 years to write.
Yeah.
But then, obviously there's 500 years of wisdom in here.
Thousands of years of wisdom. Yeah.
So, okay, so people can find this book where?
Anywhere books are sold now. It's going to be bookstores all around the country. It's in Target, Barnes & Noble, literally everywhere.
Oh my God, I'm going to be taking pictures of it everywhere.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I want to see it in the wild. But yeah, it's available anywhere books are sold, and you can find more information at the5typesofwealth.com.
Okay, cool. And also, for those of you who are like me and like to listen to your book, Sahil did narrate this himself. So
yeah, I didn't get a British actor, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
So you can hear him talk about this. And I think that's the way I'm going to listen to it. And you can get, I think I saw that you can get on you can pre-order it on Audible right now.
You can pre-order on Audible, and you can also listen to a preview before you buy it. So if you hate my voice, you don't have to buy it.
Perfect. I love that too. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, and really good to see you.
Thank you.